Hello. So today I'm going to be talking about attribution, and I've called this session Attribution 101. I'm going to be helping marketers debug paid media attribution and how that fits into your campaigns and ultimately why you should care. This is a quick intro to me. I'm Jack. I'm the group director here at Tag of looking after paid media. Yeah, let's dive into it. So the number one question that we get from marketers is, why are you seeing more conversions than me? And it is honestly the most confusing topic to explain, but hopefully I'm going to take you through that today. So first up, I'm going to take you through a normal sort of purchase journey and how that changes and how the different touch points interact. So this client has come through, and this purchase here is represented by the big dollar bag at the end, and then all the different touch points are on the little timeline. So in this instance, it's one purchase that we're talking about, just one purchase. But for that one purchase, they've seen a programmatic ad, they've searched top construction events in New York, they've seen a PMAX ad on YouTube, they've viewed a LinkedIn advert, they've clicked an Instagram story, and then they've ultimately searched and clicked a brand search. Now, I'm going to take you through the different attribution windows and how this picture will be painted in your final numbers. First up, last click. Last click literally means that it's the one right before the conversion. It ignores all other steps, and it's often assigning to something that's very high intent. So in this case, it would say branded search is where this conversion came from, which is correct, but it doesn't show that wider picture. Last click is typically how registration platforms report their conversions. And the other positive is that you have a direct source of conversion. You can match up your registration platform to your platform numbers, and everything will be, it's giving you one source of truth that is, it's very difficult to argue with. Like, that is a very short journey that we're trying to link up. It's very accurate. The negative, as I've touched on, is that it can put an unbalanced focus on a platform or a campaign that might not have been the true driver of a conversion. For example, exposure to a programmatic ad may have introduced that person to a completely new brand, or it might have been a reminder about a brand, but they went away, Googled it, and came through organic as another journey. Well, yes, that is the last click. In that journey, I think if we really sit back and say which channel drove that, programmatic has had a huge impact. And that is completely ignored with last click. Next is first click. As you can probably guess, this is the total opposite of last click. The first click is given 100% of the value of a conversion credit. So the positive is it shows the channel responsible for kicking off that journey to conversion. And it's particularly helpful for people chasing sort of high growth. So lots of new audience. You want to know what of this new audience is driving the most first click. The negative is that it can overweight on those channels. So like last click, it ignores all the other touch points along the way, and it can often over egg the impact of a channel. That programmatic ad, while as impactful as it is, it was just viewing their ad on, maybe it was like an out of home screen or a website. We really need to sort of assign weight to that. Finally, of the most common sort of attribution models that you might come across in paid media is linear. So linear, everyone has equal value. You click on a display ad, conversion. You click on a Google ad, conversion. The positive here is that we can build a full picture of which channels are or are not converting, and we can optimize those channels accordingly. The weakness is there is potential to overcount where windows overlap. So we'll come on to this a little bit more, but there is downsides to this. This is typically how Tag reports on campaigns. One asterisk I'll put to sort of overlap right now is that you're not going to see that until you're at complete audience saturation. It's very rare that you're in that sort of stage that we're at total overlap. And there's things and steps that you can take to minimize it as much as possible using exclusions and things like that we do in our campaigns. Finally, I just wanted to touch on sort of the other three most common ones that are around. The reason why I've not featured this in our timeline here is that they tend to require some kind of software that is expensive and takes time to implement. So first is time decay. It's where you assign a different weight. So our one conversion, we split down into one, and we might assign 0.25, 0.35, and so on to different channels, and it decays. So the closer to the conversion, the more you can assign weight. Then we've got position based. So that's if we look at our timeline and say, okay, that first conversion was really valuable because they introduced, everything in between wasn't as valuable, and then that final one was valuable. There's pros and cons to that, but again, that's how that works. And then data based. So this is, for example, what GA4 runs on. It basically uses an unknown algorithm to calculate how those sort of things positioned. The skeptic in me says GA4 is a Google product. How much does it weigh a Google ad to that? Don't know. But it's just important to remember and come into it with your eyes wide open. That's how it's calculating. Okay, now this is where it's got potential to get messy, but we'll work our way through it. So first up is view through conversions. These are probably the second, if not the most common reason for confusion or mistrusting conversion numbers, but they're a super powerful tool, especially for growing your event with new data. So view through essentially means someone is shown an ad and then goes on to convert in a given window. So for example, Meta defaults to 24 hours after exposure. So what that looks like is someone may see an ad on Instagram, they might never click on it, but they're inspired to go away and Google it. View through allows us to show that journey and make adjustments accordingly. So actually, Meta's done a good job there, and we want to be able to see that, because if we were then looking at our channel mix and where we're going to put budget, we'd be like, actually, Meta has generated that conversion, even if we're not seeing it through as a click or something like that. And this is where we've sort of met the final boss of how confusing this can get. Click conversions. We've talked a lot about different kinds of clicks, and not all clicks are created equal. Platforms typically have extended windows for click conversions. So someone may click on an ad and then convert a couple days later. The platform will still report a conversion here. To use a similar example, you may click on an Instagram ad, go away, and then convert it a couple days later. Instagram will still attribute a conversion here. It differs from last click because it happens in a different session. So again, when looking into your reg platform data, you'll see nothing. So this user's clicked, but they've converted later. Your reg platform will still show whatever that last thing was, whether that's like an organic search ad or anything like that. They do this as an extended window because click has higher intent than view through. It's fair to say if I've clicked on an ad versus one I've seen scrolling by, there's way more intent. I was way more likely to buy there. And so it's fairer to extend the window out because it was more likely that has generated a conversion. It's harder for us to say to be really definite that a conversion happened as a result of a view than it is a click. So it's better to get a fair picture of performance. And again, it's all about how can we optimize performance towards these, because we need to be able to see that picture to understand and grow your event. And then finally, I wanted to touch on opt-out and sort of changing user behavior. So Google may have backed out of cookie deprecation in the end, but it's still coming. It's just going to be slower and a little bit quieter. We've been on this journey since 2014 with the introduction of GDPR. And yes, your cookie banners should have been working way back then. The amount of event organizers that are now panicking since the DSA came out that they should have working cookie banners is quite incredible. GDPR basically outlined that. And then the other thing that often gets left out is the IDFA opt-out. So this was essentially when iOS 14 rolled out for Apple users. You'll all know that box that says, do you allow this app to track? We've also seen this followed by similar legislation in the US and states like California. This is a trend that's going to keep coming. Cookies will go away. How does that impact you? Well, simply, if you have a working cookie banner, you will see a 20 to 30% drop in cookie-based conversions. That's an approximation based on what we've seen. It can vary between industry, market, all sorts of different things, but you will see a drop in the amount of data that you are collecting. It's not to say that it's not happening, but you will see a drop. It's also going to especially impact click-based ones. So for example, if I'm browsing on Instagram and say I'm opted in for iOS 14, I will still fire off a view through conversion. However, if I were to click on a site and reject the banner, and I've been given the opportunity to opt out of your tracking, no more. You will not see that conversion be reported. I will still convert, just not going to see it anywhere. However, it will be included in your reg platform data because this is UTM based. So last click models will continue to track reg platforms. But as we've spoken about, last click models have big drawbacks for when we're trying to grow events and optimize towards best performing events, best performing campaigns, I should say. And it means that we miss a massive portion of the picture. So just to digress a little bit from attribution shortly, this also spends its end to retargeting audiences. We've already seen a decline in these highly effective campaigns, and that will continue. As more and more people opt out of cookie-based tracking, you will see less and less populated remarketing audiences, and how you adjust and change that is super important. And then as we've spoken about, you need to use other attribution models to see that picture. You're not going to see the same performance from your lower funnel, from those things that really well in last click. You're going to have to look at different metrics to understand how your campaigns are performing and where you should be spending your money. If you've got any questions, please feel free to drop me an email, and thanks for listening.